Hi everyone, and welcome to another exciting share on Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, of course, continuing from where we left off last time. Just people joining, let you in. Okay. Okay. Just let these 8 people in. Please admit. Admit. Right. We are on page 546 in the Art Scroll Chumash, Art Scroll Siddur, 546 in the Art Scroll Siddur. We are up to number 8. We are up to Mishnah number 8. If you're following in the Chabad Siddur, it's on page 272. And again, number 8, Mishnah Chet. Chet for number 8. Of course, there's something significant about the number 8 in that it is talking about miracles rather than the natural order of things, number 7. So hopefully we can reach a bit of a higher plane today with our studies. And of course, everybody needs a little bit of a boost, a pickup, and a little bit of a higher vision of everything, I guess, after the occurrences of the past week, which have been quite difficult and devastating for the whole of Am Yisrael. Of course, the tragedy that happened in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, and hopefully we'll be able to bring some merit and credit to those neshamas, both the ones who needed a refuah shlema, as well as to all those who lost their lives, with our shir today. So we're continuing, and we come to another pair. Remember, we spoke about the fact that there were pairs of leadership of the Jewish people, and here we come to 2 other leaders. One is Yehuda ben Tabai, and the other one is Shimon ben Shattach. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shattach. Now, these were great men in and of their own right. One of the unfortunate things that is mentioned about, and it probably has a relevance in the fact that both of them speak about courts of justice and how to deal with people who come before your court and so on. And that is that it's pointed out that Yehuda ben Tabai would never sit in a capital case, in a case where there was a possibility of a death penalty, because he was once part of a court that got it wrong. And quite amazingly, yes, even with all the stringencies and strictnesses of the Sanhedrin and the courts of those days, and the way that they scrutinized things, and they made sure that they took care of every possible eventuality, especially in a case that could cost somebody their lives. Yehuda ben Tabai, we're told, actually was part of a Beit Din, part of a court that once got it wrong, and unfortunately put somebody to death when it was proved afterwards to have been an incorrect finding. And therefore he would not sit in those. So kind of he did tshuva for that for the rest of his life, even though absolutely justified in that he was protected, of course, by the law, and the fact that they'd followed that scrupulously followed every single rule and regulation. Nevertheless, this is just a little bit of a background to what we're going to see that follows here now. So we say, Yehuda ben Tabai v'Shimon ben Shattach kiblu mehem. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shattach received it from the previous, so they got the oral tradition from Yeshua ben Prachia and Nitai HaArbeli. So this was being handed down from generation to generation. And here we have the first statement by this famous sage, this famous leader, Yehuda ben Tabai. And Yehuda ben Tabai tells us something here that seems to be much more addressed to judges. He is addressing judges in a court, And of course, whenever we have these laws, they're not just written for judges. When he's addressing the judges in a court, he's actually addressing each and every one of us, because every one of us, every day and every moment of every day, and every time we come into contact with other people or whatever, we're making judgments. There are judgment calls all the time. And so, of course, it's obviously addressed to that end as well. But he says, fascinating. Al ta'as atzmecha ka'orchei hadayonim. Do not make yourself ka'orchei hadayonim, like the orchei hadayonim. Now, an orech din, according to a colloquial expression, an orech din is a lawyer. He's telling us, don't make yourself like the lawyers. Ka'orchei hadayonim. Don't make yourself like the lawyers. And we'll complete the Mishnah and then come back and unpick it, take it apart and take a look at each part of it, each segment of it. And he says, and when the Baalei Din, when the litigants in a case are standing before you, they should appear before you as being wicked, as being bad guys, when they stand before you. And when they depart from you, when they leave from you, they should be in your eyes as meritorious. So a very, very big difference, it seems, in the way that we're used to, that modern law, that civil law tells us that a person before the law is innocent until proven guilty. It seems to be that what Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai is telling us is that we should view the litigants as being guilty before they're proven innocent, that the court of law is there in order to prove them innocent rather than guilty. But is this actually what it means? They should appear to you to be meritorious when they leave you, when they go away from you, since they have accepted upon themselves the din, the judgment. So let's go back and take a look at what Yehuda ben Tabai tells us, because he actually tells us a lot. First of all, first statement, blanket statement, Al ta'as atzmecha ka'orchei hadayonim. Do not make yourself like the lawyers. Now, this is not a knock on lawyers. This is not telling us that lawyers are bad guys. This is not stating that at all. He's telling us that in our way of judgment, and particularly talking to judges in a court, do not make yourself like orchei din, like lawyers. Let's begin by saying that the first thing that we need to look at is, in fact, this word orech. Orech means organizer. And orech, we talk about orech din, orchei, that they organize the law. They're organizing the law. What does it mean that they organize the law? Well, there are some who say that, in fact, this word orech could come from, and you've heard a word similar to this, and it's a fascinating connection, because some of our modern commentators tell us that there is a connection between this word, orech, and the English word arch, A-R-C-H. You know, when lahavdil, when you talk about an archbishop or an archdeacon or whatever, lahavdil, in the church and so on, when we talk about that, what are they talking about? It's overarching. These are the people who are kind of viewed as being, in inverted commas, above the law. He's number one, they say, perhaps telling us, do not make yourself like those orchei hadayonim. Remember, you're not above the law, and remember, you're not a supreme judge. You're not a supreme judge, not whether you are a dayan on the Beis Din, or whether you are a member of the Sanhedrin, or whether you just Mr. Joe Blogg or Mrs. Joe Blogg who's walking around and making judgment calls all the time. Remember, you don't always have it right. It's not always right. And this will now reflect back to what I told you right in the beginning about the author or the person stating this very Mishnah, that he himself learned by a tragic mistake that was made in a case that he sat in. And therefore, he's telling us perhaps the advice of don't always think when it comes to judgment that you know everything. Don't always think that your call is always going to be the right call. You've got to always leave open the opportunity, the possibility that maybe your opinion is not correct, that maybe the way that you saw it is not right. Giving the benefit of the doubt all the time to the litigants or to the people in front of you or to the individuals that you are passing judgment upon. And remember that you're not the arch dayan. You're not the oirech din. That's one interpretation of what this word oirech din actually means. But there is another one. More common, much more common, is the oirech din is the lawyer. The lawyer. Now, if you think about, and you only have to perhaps read through, and in fact, I was reading through one just over the weekend, a famous case where you watch how the lawyers, in doing their interrogation of a person on the stand, when they get their teeth, so to speak, into somebody on the stand, wow, they're bright, they're smart, and they can bring out the best or the worst in an individual, depending on whether they are the defense or they're the prosecution, when they are questioning the person. Now, they can therefore, just by their questioning and just by their line of approach, they can actually manipulate, in a way, the minds of the judges or the minds of the court in a certain passage. They tell a story and they go with that story in a certain case and in a certain way, and they can lead the evidence. This is what we call leading evidence. They can lead the person on the stand, whether it is a witness or whether it is a litigant or whether it is an expert. They can lead them in a certain path, in a certain way, which maybe the person standing there didn't actually intend. They weren't really part of that story. That's not the story that they saw or they heard, but they can actually lead it down a way, and they get the person to actually literally lead the evidence. They take it into, and they paint a certain picture, after which it's very, very difficult for you to extract your mind from that particular picture. Now, he is telling us here, Yehuda ben Tabai is actually telling us here about the absolute impartiality that judges have to have. And therefore, when you are called upon to judge something, you also have to have that impartiality, that ability to not only see both sides, but the ability to take what each side is saying, what each person is saying, or to look at a particular person in a particular case, in a particular matter, or in an interpersonal relationship, and give them the benefit of the doubt. See both sides. Remember, or think about how you would have behaved in their shoes, etc. All of these things have to come into play. You can't go for the story, the one-sided story, that a particular oirech din, that a particular lawyer, whether he is prosecuting or whether he's defending on a particular side, will actually take. And in fact, therefore, one of the systems that's in place in Jewish court of law is that there are no orchei din. There were no lawyers that represented people, because even if they are, the lawyer doesn't lead evidence. He's not the one who cross-questions. The judges do the cross-questioning. The judges do the interrogation of the witnesses. The judges have to sit there and be totally and absolutely impartial. And if they're adopting a certain stance, if they're leading the evidence, if they're taking or expressing an opinion, in fact, in this particular case that I was reading, the judge got involved, and it actually irks you. It doesn't sit well that the judge actually, in the middle of the interrogation of the witness, actually expresses, it's quite astounding to see how the judge actually expresses an opinion in a way. For instance, the lawyer was saying, I failed to understand how you could have got from point A to point B in that particular amount of time. The judge says, I also don't understand. Now, as soon as a judge does that from a Jewish point of view, he has made himself impartial. He's expressing an opinion. He is no longer impartial. He's becoming an oirech din. He is now already telling the person sitting there in the witness box, or perhaps it's the accused himself, he's already telling him that in a way he's passed a certain judgment. And this is the job of an Oirech Din. This is the job of a lawyer, and the lawyer's got to do his job. It's not the job of a judge. It's not the way that a judge is allowed to sit and allowed to pass judgment. Now, the next point then is that when the Baalei Din, when the two litigants, perhaps in a financial matter, perhaps in an interpersonal matter, perhaps in a matter of delicts, they're standing in front of the judges, they come before the court. We have to view them, judges, he says, you view them as being Rishoyim, view them as being wicked. Now here's a fascinating take on Jewish law. We would think, as we said before, that you've got to be innocent before the law, before proven guilty. And therefore, how can we say that the judge has to look at them both as being wicked? Well, there is an element of wickedness. And perhaps to demonstrate, let's go all the way back to a case that you know well, that occurs in Torah, famous case of the greatest of all people who ever lived, the greatest of all our leaders, Moshe Rabbeinu himself, who passes a certain judgment at a certain time, and it is written into the annals of Torah right in the beginning of the book of Shmos, in the beginning of the book of Exodus, about how Moshe Rabbeinu judges. And Moshe Rabbeinu goes down in history as being Adon Din Emes La'amito. We talk about him as being an incredibly perfect judge. Moshe Rabbeinu, we say, had the ability to take a look at any situation, any people, anyone who came before him, and he was able to immediately see the truth. He could see it. Don Din Emes La'amito, he was a good, honest, perfect, true judge. He was able to see that. He had this godly gift that he was able to see the truth. Not everybody has that. But here we have it all demonstrated perhaps to us. And to bring out this point that Yehuda ben Tabai raises here about how we've got to view the litigants in a case. Now let's give you the case and let's remember it and let's think about it for a moment. We have a case in Torah where you have two people who are arguing, who are fighting, and Moshe Rabbeinu comes and intervenes. You know the story. It was one day that Moshe Rabbeinu, who was at the time living as a prince of Egypt, he was in the king's palace, in Pharaoh's palace, and he was living there as a prince. And he goes out one day and he sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating up or fighting with a Jew. And he looks around, he says, he looks here and there. He sees Ki Ein Ish, he says there's nobody around. And what does he do? He kills the Egyptian. And he buries him in the sand. He buries him in the soil, digs a shallow grave, buries him, and he thinks that that's the end of the story. But the very next day, he goes out and he sees two Jews involved in an argument. And here with the two Jews involved in the argument, we know that the one says to him, or one of them says to him, are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian yesterday? And he knows that now the cat's out of the bag. Everybody's talking about it. He's got to quit town. He's got to get out of there. And of course, this begins his whole foray to Midian, where he eventually meets his wife, etc. And it's from there that he comes back to save the Jewish people from their bondage. So here he is in Egypt still, and he sees these two Jews fighting. And there is a fascinating statement by Torah. Torah says that he took a look at the Rasha. He took a look at the wicked one. He took a look at the one who was wrong amongst the two. And we know that obviously when two people are fighting, there's either one of them is wrong or both of them are wrong, but somehow he took a look at the one who was wrong, and he said to him, Lama takereyecha, why are you hitting? Why are you fighting with your neighbor? Why are you fighting with your friend, with your brother? What are you doing? And of course, Torah asks the question, and the Mefarshim ask the question, and it's obvious. How did Moshe Rabbeinu know which one was wrong? So here we say, point number one, possibility number one. is that he took a look at the situation. He was a Don Din Emislamita. He was an absolutely perfect judge. And he took a look at these two guys fighting. He knew instinctively this one was wrong and this one was right. He knew it. He was an absolutely perfect judge. So that's one opinion. He took a look at them and he was able to tell immediately this one is wrong and this one is meritorious. There is a second opinion that says that he took a look at the two of them and he makes a judgment call on the wickedness of an individual, not by the case, but his question is, why are you hitting your fellow man? And says Torah, hitting somebody is wicked. So he was able to judge not on the merits, perhaps, about what they were fighting about, but the fact that one raises a hand and is ready to clap the other one. The fact that this person raises a hand, that in itself is wicked. And Torah says, if somebody lifts up a hand to somebody else, that in itself is wicked. And this is whether it is in two people fighting between each other, whether it is in a domestic situation, God forbid. But the raising of a hand to hit somebody, hitting, this is not Jewish. And clapping somebody in this kind of a way, not Jewish. It's called rishus, it's called wickedness. And therefore, says this Pirush, Moshe Rabbeinu took a look at that action, the lifting of the hand to hit somebody, that in itself was wicked, and he passed judgment on that. But here we come to a third opinion, which actually fits in here with what Yehuda ben Tabai is telling us. And that is, Torah says Moshe Rabbeinu didn't make a judgment call based on the evidence of the case or the instance of the case. He didn't make a judgment call based on the fact that one was hitting and the other one was not. But he made a judgment call on the fact that two Jews were fighting. He didn't necessarily pick on and say, this one is right and this one is wrong. But just the fact that people are fighting, both of them were wicked. And here we're saying something very, very similar. Yehuda ben Tabai is telling us that just the fact that two Jews get involved in litigation, there's something wrong. There is something wrong that there has to be litigation. Yes, of course, we have a court set up. Yes, of course, we have a Beit Din. Yes, of course, we have judgment, we have a Sanhedrin and so on. But when two Jews are litigating against each other, there is something wrong with them both. There is something wrong with the action of having to go to court. Why? Because it means that you don't have enough Ahavas Yisrael. You don't have enough love, both of you, for each other in order to be able to find a way to sort it out. If you did, you would be able to sort it out. You'd go, you would talk it over, you would be able to sort it out. We would be able to give, we'd be able to understand, we'd be able to compromise and so on. All of those things, part and parcel of how people are supposed to behave towards each other. And yes, of course, we have to use the courts of law. And yes, of course, we have to use our Sanhedrin. And yes, of course, litigation comes before them. But there is a tarnish even on the one who is 100% correct. When you walk into a court of law, says Yehuda ben Tabai, there's something wrong with you. There is something wrong. And you've got to know that. And we've got to know that. And yes, we can all say that, but this was totally and absolutely unavoidable. And I couldn't get him to see the light. And he was behaving badly. And this was whatever. Absolutely correct and 100%. But Yehuda ben Tabai says the fact that you got caught up in this kind of a case at this kind of a time or whatever, Hashgacha Elyon, divine providence, there is something wrong. And the judges have to realize that actually when two people walk into a court of law, both of them on both sides of the divide have got something that needs to be looked at because there's something wrong. They can't make this peace. And in fact, the way that courts of law, the Jewish courts of law, Bate Din actually work always, and I hope nobody has been, after all that introduction, that nobody has had the experience of having a litigation in front of a Beit Din. The Beit Din is obligated to try and resolve it amicably before they sit in judgment. They will send the people out to another room and say, go there, and in the precinct of the Beit Din, Hopefully there will be some influence of having the law hanging over your heads, the din actually hanging there, and hopefully you can go and sort it out amicably. They've got to go for an amicable resolution before they give a psak din, before they pass judgment. Why? Yehuda ben Tabai tells us, because when litigants appear before you, they've got to appear to you to be Rishoyim. And then, and when they go away from you, when they leave you, they've got to appear before you as being meritorious. Now, this is very difficult. You're taking a look at a case, and perhaps you're sitting in a case where you see, and it's obvious, that the one guy is a tzaddik, and the other one is an absolute rosha. The way that he behaved and the way that he did things was terrible. And he was a ganef, and he was a shakran, he was a liar, and he was a thief, and he was a cheat, and he was all of those things. 1 second. If the two of them accept the din, if they accept the judgment, and they're actually there stating, you know what, we will accept this judgment. You're ordering me to pay him back because I stole, or because I lied, or because I cheated. I am admitting here, I lied, I cheated, I stole, and I am going to pay him back, or start making the payment, or find the way to make that restitution. Tzaddik, righteous, zakoin. We've got to look at them both as being righteous. You can't, as judges, bear grudges or hold a person responsible if they've walked out of the court and they've accepted the din. Because they've accepted the din, they've accepted the judgment upon themselves. Now, very often in a court of law, what actually happens, unfortunately, is that the people can profess, they can state in the court of law that they accept the judgment, and the next day they have charota. They walk out of there and they regret the decision to accept. And they walk out of there and they want to take the judges to court. It's happened before. It can happen again. Now, this is called rishus. This is called wickedness. It is meritorious only if you accept the judgment. And acceptance of the judgment is regarded as the promotion from being a rosha to a zakai, from going from wickedness to a state of being meritorious. Now, when we think about this Mishnah, we can maybe put a completely different spin on it. If we think about courts of law, when do you and I stand in a court of law? Come Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, in fact, we're in a court of law. If we think about what happens there, we think about the fact that we are listing all the terrible things that we've done. I stole, and I cheated, and I lied, and I did all of these things. And I admit to all sorts of heinous and terrible crimes. At the moment, I'm declared as a Rosh. But come the end of that, so we really say, you know what? We are now zakoyim. We've accepted the din, we've accepted the judgment, we've accepted the punishment that we need to have gotten from Shamayim, from heaven, and now we walk out of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we walk out of there zakoyim, we walk out of there purified, we walk out of there clean. That's what Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that's the whole process, that's what it's about. We come in there, we're dirty. We go out of there, we're clean. This is the process, but we can take it even further, and we think about our time in this world. Perhaps the time in this world is like one big court case as well. And when we think about, there's one word in this Mishnah that maybe hints to that. That word, keshe niftarim, the word niftar. Niftar is not a pleasant word in the way that it's used today. A niftar is someone who's passed away, someone who's left this world. So keshe niftarim, when they are going away from you. When we go away from this world, zakoin. So perhaps to suggest here a bit of a different stance on it all is that we're being told something about the way that God takes a look at us, and that we're supposed to look at people. In this world, we face all sorts of challenges. We have all sorts of difficulties. We have all sorts of problems. Everything that we've got to confront on a regular basis that sometimes leads us to behave in an incorrect fashion. We know that sometimes when we make a mistake, we're like Roshaim, we're wicked. In fact, according to Torah, if you transgress one mitzvah, you're called Rosha, you're called wicked at that particular time. But once we leave from here, We've been makabel the din. We've accepted the judgment. What do we say when somebody dies? God forbid, we say, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, God who is the true judge. We understand that at that stage there is a judgment that takes place. We know that the neshama, as it leaves this world, has admitted, has said, you know what, this judgment I'm accepting upon myself. And then we say, after people have died. The parshas that we just had spell out this incredible thing. After death, we say that they're righteous. This is something that we need to know. When a person leaves this world, has accepted the judgment, has gone to Shamayim, they're Kedoshim, they're holy. And this is, in fact, perhaps what Yehuda ben Tabai is hinting at as well. It's not only in a court of law. It's not only in day-to-day practice. It's not only in the way we are each and every day of our lives in our interaction with this world, but it may also be life in general, and the way that we expect God to judge us, and the way that, in fact, we should mimic him and be judges in and of ourselves. Thank you for listening today. We look forward to another exciting installment next week at 1 o'clock on our next Shira Pirkei Avos. We'll move on to Mishnah number 9, Mishnah Tes, where we then will hear from Shimon ben Shattach, the other part of this partnership of these two great people. Have a great week. Look forward to being back with you next week. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Keep well, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Hello. How's everybody?